Hey guys, we're back again with another very large kit. This time we're moving out of prop era and into the jet age with Tamiya's 1/32nd scale F-4J Phantom 2. Now, this is the particular boxing for the Navy version with an air-to-air load. Tamiya also makes a Marine version that's spec'd out for ground attack. So for the most part, they're the same kit, with the main difference being the armament included with it. Fortunately, this version does not come with any air-to-ground munitions, so something to be aware of when you do decide to go with what version you want to go with. So let's open her on up and take a look. Again, this is a very, very large kit, as you can tell by the boxing. Now, and there goes a bunch of stuff that I just knocked over. Get back to that. So anyway, let's start out here with our first sprue, containing our inlets, which are done as two half pieces. So that is something to be aware of. You will have to clean those up. I do know there is a company out there that does make aftermarket seamless ones, so that is an option. Moving on, we've got our splitter vanes as well. Those build up into there. Now, interestingly, they chose to do the arresting hook as two separate halves as opposed to one solid assembly. So that is something you will have to spend some time cleaning up. But overall, it shouldn't be too terrible. Another interesting choice, and we'll see more of this a little later, is that they did the landing gear as separate halves without a central pull. Again, we'll see why in a little bit, but that is an interesting choice. And it also, I'll tell you this now, as I was doing some research for this kit, found no examples of aftermarket metal landing gear. Again, we'll see why in a minute. Beyond that, detailing, especially like here in the wing fold sections, is more than adequate. Typical Tamiya quality. Found no degrees as points of ejector pin marks, safer on the back of these, but since these will not be seen, it's not a non-issue. Similarly, much of the detailing is more than adequate on the various gear doors and other sub-assemblies. Continuing on, again, here with our central fuel tank, and get a real size of just how big this thing is going to be once it's built up. Similarly with the outer wing sections. Now, they do mold the slats in the slightly down position, so that is something to be aware of. I do believe they also make aftermarkets to have them fully open. Again, that's one of those things that I would say is a diminishing rate of return on terms of detail. If you have to have it, it's nice to know you can get that, but beyond that, I'd say it's not worth it. Moving on from there, we've got our weapon pylons, air station, as well as the launch rails. Passable amount of detailing on those. And you do get the fuel port for mid-air refueling if you want to have that displayed in the open position. Not going to be there that often, but it's a nice to have. Again, also got our nice big nose cone as well. Now, continuing on, again, as I said, you only get the air-to-air load on this particular boxing, which is disappointing. It would be nice if you got both, but is what it is. You've got mid-model Sparrow and mid-model AIM-9s included in the box. Again, obviously, if you want to do different versions, you're going to have to source those weapons elsewhere. Unfortunately, that's going to be harder to do, simply because unlike 48 scale, where you have, the Hasegawa weapon sets and various other companies that have put out sets, 32nd scale you're going to be a little harder to source weapons for. Moving on, one of the weaker areas I would say is here on the exhaust nozzle. Detailing is okay, but the inner detailing is fairly poor. This is another area where I would say it's might be worth it to splurge a little and upgrade. Similarly here in the turbine section. Beyond that, ejection seats okay. It's a passable. Another area if you want to upgrade, you can. Detailing on the missiles is more than adequate, especially for this scale. Again, it's another one of those areas of diminishing returns. Now, where things get a little interesting is here in the front office. Obviously, detailing is quite nice for the cockpit. However, and this is a big however, the parts included on this sprue are not for the J. They're actually for the earlier B. So technically, you could buy this and build a B. Only problem would be with the weapons, you'd have to source appropriate weapons for that. So that'd be an early model Sidewinder and Sparrow. So that is something to be aware of. That does give you options. Beyond that, cockpit detail, again, for the scale, is more than passable. I mean, out of the box, it's good to go. I would not say you have to spend the added money for the aftermarket stuff, but you can. It's something to consider. Now, as I said, separate parts for J model are included on a separate sprue. Obviously, as time progressed, they upgraded a lot of the avionics from the B version. So, something to be aware of, and make sure you go with the right parts. Now, this is one aspect of the kit I love. One of the biggest problems that the Hasegawa Phantoms have in 48 scale is that they have this front area as a separate part. That means more often than not, you're going to get this really bad gap right here where the front cockpit connects to the fuselage. On this Tamiya, they didn't do that. They did it all as one assembly. That is fantastic. The only downside is they included the nose gear bay as attached onto here. It would be nice had they done it separate just because it'd make it a little easier to paint. But it is what it is. Beyond that, again, surface detailing. And again, this is another one of those, I hope it shows up on camera, is quite nice. Tamiya has done a very good job on this kit. Again, you can really tell just how big this thing will be once it's built. I do like they also included this protective sleeve for it, just to help make sure it survives. Now, we're on to the big part. And again, they kept this in here to help keep it protected. We have our main fuselage. They, instead of doing it as two halves, they did it as this one very large assembly. Only complaint I have is here on these parts. They're a little overscale, but it's one of those, it's not really going to be seen, so it's kind of dumb to split hairs. Because those could be a little thinner, but again, diminishing rates of returns. Beyond that, surface detailing, again, is excellent. All nice little bits are there. Interesting, a lot of these parts are going to have to be screwed together, so that's something to be aware of. Some of that I think is just for structural concerns, just to help make sure it stays together, as this is a big boy. Now, this is not your little 48 scale guy, and God forbid it, dainty little 72nd scale. Now, continue on, as I said, screws, a lot of the sub-assemblies. Now, we do have the rest of our ejection seats, the outer sides. Interesting, they chose to do them assembled in this manner, as it does make it a little easier for us to put them together, as we're not trying to fiddle in those two halves together. So that is a nice plus there. And before I forget, we have our bottom tail section. Again, nice that they include the little screwdriver for it. Again, having it separate, interesting choice will make simply a little interesting. So, moving on. Now we got our wing halves, as well as the rest of the inlets. Again, surface detail choices are excellent. Like that, they keep the outer wings as separate parts so that you do have the option of doing the wing folded up. Only concern would be, some of the fit and fiddling, but it's one of those, if you take your time, you can get it done and do it right. Now, last, as far as the sprues go, are clear parts. Overall, fine. Cast, no blemishes that I can see and are surprisingly thin. I mean, they capture very fine detailing on that. Now, I mentioned before why we might have issues with the landing gear. And before I forget, it does come with rubber wheels, so that is something to be aware of. I personally have never had problems with rubber wheels. Some people have. It's a hit and miss type thing. Reason they did landing gear as they did, because they give you separate full metal gears with the plastic parts assembling around it. This is an absolute must in this scale, especially for this bird. This is a very heavy kit, so just the plastic by itself is not going to hold up. If it didn't come with these, I would say immediately you need to go and source some metal landing gear, as just the plastic by itself is not going to hold up. So give me a second to get all this back in, and then we'll move on to decals and the instructions. Okay. So, given decaling options for two different Navy birds, and one Marine. Again, obviously having just the air-to-air munitions, you're kind of limited. So I would say, since this is a non-bird, you might want to go ahead and find some other additional munitions, but that's just me. As far as the decals themselves, fantastic job on Tamiya's part. With the only critique I have being that they do feel a little on the thicker side, so that is something to be aware of. But as far as color, register, everything is sharp, crisp, and very nicely done. As we see there, and then move on to the more monochromatic. They do include all the walkways, so you do have that as an option. I would almost say it might be worthwhile to mask those off and paint them yourself. But, again, it never hurts to have the option. So let's get these back in, and then we'll move on to our instructions. Now, the Tamiya guide does include a nice little introductory history bit in the front, which never hurts to have. But assembly right away starts with our inlets and builds up onto the main fuselage from there. Again, you're probably going to need to do a bit of cleaning up on those. And since they are decently sized, you do want to spend a little extra TLC on that, as they will be pretty visible. Beyond that, it builds up from there. So out from that point for doing the engines, the tail control surfaces, and then moving on into the cockpit. So it is a bit of a departure from the traditional cockpit. On from there, but once you get from there, it builds into attaching everything onto the fuselage, or mating up the fuselage with the lower wings and going from there. Again, I would say if you're depending on what option to go with, make sure you spend a little time with making sure you get the alignment for the wing fold section correct, as that will save you a headache down the road. Beyond that, assembly is pretty straightforward. There's no super, gotchas that I was able to find. Just mostly take your time and read the instructions. Beyond that, though, I think the biggest issue you'll run into is just some of the size of this. Working with a bigger kit is a little bit challenging just due to the fact that you are typically not prepared for it. Truth be told, time of this review, just finishing up Revell Corsair, and that was an interesting experience just because of working with the larger size. Beyond that, as I said, there's not a lot of gotchas with this kit, at least that I was able to find. It's just one of those, take your time, read the instructions, and you shouldn't have any real issues. Now, as I mentioned before, several different marking options, and 3 in total. Do like they include the full stencil details as a separate page, as it never hurts to have that as a reference. Beyond that, it's pretty straightforward. They do all share the same paint scheme, so that is something you might want to consider when choosing. But as far as the actual design and build of this guy, it's very nice. This is arguably one of Tamiya's better kits. And while Hasegawa may have the market cornered for 48th scale, as pretty sure they've done just about every variant of the Phantom in 48th, Tamiya's done a good chunk of the variants in 32nd scale. So why the J may not be for you, they do have the E, EJ, and BC. So you do have a large number of options to build. So if you are looking for a Phantom in 32nd scale, this is a fantastic little kit, whether you go with this version or the other version that's equipped with for a ground attack, or hell, both and mix. So that was a look at Tamiya's 1/32nd scale F-4J, spec for air-to-air. Very nice kit, but because of its size, you're going to want to prepare yourself a little. So, until next time.